Hello, friends. In this video, we are going to be talking about the subject of reading. I know reading can be really intense for some people when they're trying to teach their children how to read and they think, I don't know how to do this. And the thought of reading or teaching your child to read is very intimidating to you. If that's you, you're in the right place. It really isn't an intimidating thing because we want to teach in normal and natural ways. If we force things on our children, then it can become a nightmare. So I want you to think about this with me for a minute. I've heard this several times by very large reading sources, like people who do this for a living. Almost all agree that the average reading age is 7 years old. So by 7 years old, on average, that means that they should be reading about that time. Now, the same thing goes with this. I love this analogy because it's so interesting how we think our children need to be right on those benchmarks. When we have our first child, sometimes we watch those benchmarks so close to make sure that they're developing correctly, right? But as you have more children, you understand that children are going to be ready when they're ready. And unless there's like some really weird outlier that happens with your child, and there's something that needs attention drawn to it, normally your children will learn it when they're ready to learn these things. Reading is much the same way. So you think about children and when they should walk. We hear children can be walking between about the age of 9, 10 months, right? Give or take how many months in between. Sometimes children don't walk until they're almost 2. Sometimes children walk a little bit earlier, like at 9 or 8 months. So this is what I want you to keep in your mind as we're talking about reading, because reading is one of those things that is necessary to be developmentally ready for. And if we force reading on our children too early when they're not developmentally ready for it, it can be really heartbreaking for them and for you because they will lose interest in reading. And so we don't want that to happen. So, what are the signs that tell us that our child is ready to read? There are several things that people have said before. I know Marie Montessori has mentioned that around the same time your child loses their first tooth, they might start showing interest in reading then. And so that was kind of an indicator for Marie Montessori when she saw a child lose their first tooth that, oh, they're going to be ready to read here shortly. She just found that as a connection with our children. The other thing I want to share with you is that age range of that child. We know that the average is around 7 years old, but this is a give or take 4 years. So your child may be ready to start reading at 3, or they may be ready to start reading at 11. Now, I know there's a huge panic mode going off in your heart right now, like, oh, 11 is so old and they should be reading by 11. But if your child is not ready and they're not showing the signs or the interest of reading, and you push that reading on them, they will not like reading the rest of their life. So, as homeschool moms, I think that's one of the things that is so valuable to understand, because we put our children in the system and then the system says they have to be reach this benchmark and this benchmark, and they put all these benchmarks on our children, when in reality a lot of the children just really aren't ready for those benchmarks to reach them, mentally or physically ready for those things. So that's one of the things I want to help you be aware of, is that if your child is 7, 8 and they're not quite reading yet and there's not a lot of interest in it, where we hit the panic button or we start looking at it. I don't even want to say we hit the panic button, but we start looking at it more intently when they get to the age 11 and they're still not really showing a lot of interest in reading. But there are things that we can do so that when they are ready, they can flow right into the reading process. And that's what I want to share with you today, because we don't just say, hey, well, Heather said that they might not be ready to read by 11, so I'm just not going to worry about it. We're not going to work on reading until they show that interest in reading. That is not what I'm saying. So get that one out of your head too, because we don't want to leave them until they're 11 and say, hey, you're 11 now, let's start reading. No, that's not how it works. We want to provide the environment to help them have the desire to want to read, and then they'll pick it up and they'll start reading when they are ready for it. So a couple of things. The first thing is to look for signs of pre-reading. The pre-reader has a lot of different signs to it that helps you understand what level they're at and if they're ready to move further into the next levels. So I'm going to tell you the 4 levels that you want to look for in reading and how you can scaffold or help build up their interest and their love for reading where they're at. That doesn't mean that they're going to still read at 5 or they're still going to read at 3 if you develop this system for them. It just means that you're fostering a love for learning and a love for reading. And so when they are ready to read, they will love it and want to do it more too. So here are the 4 levels. The first one is pre-reader. What does a pre-reader look like? So with pre-reading, we're going to be looking at language. How well are they speaking? If they have a large vocabulary and they're speaking like an adult, like most first child or children do, most first children will speak a lot. And a lot of older children or the oldest child will probably read a little bit faster than some of the other children just because they're around adults more. So watch their language and how much they're communicating. If they're not communicating a whole lot, that's where you want to start encouraging them. Encouraging them to start talking and to start communicating is the first step of helping them be a good reader and successful reader. So looking at their language. The next thing you're wanting to look for is their book play. Like, how are they playing with their book? Are they looking at the books like this? Because you'll see them when they're little, they'll look at the book upside down and they'll even maybe start from the back and they'll just be reading and just looking at stuff and their pictures will be upside down. But what we're really looking for is book sense. We can help teach them and foster book sense by showing them the books and showing them how to open them and what's upside, right, upside, downside, what's the correct way to hold the book and how you hold a book. We can teach them and we can foster those things in their environment. But until they can do this on their own, they're really not quite ready to read. So we're looking for them being able to hold their book upright the correct way and that they're opening the book from the front to the back, because sometimes we'll even have kids flip it and they'll open it this way from the back to the front. So how they're handling their book. Look at how they're handling their book, and that's going to tell you if they're ready to move on to start learning to read in the next steps. So the next thing that we want to look at in this first stage is their reading and listening. Are they interested in listening to the stories? If there's not a lot of interest in you're reading a story and a short story like this one, you're reading a short story to them and they're off running around and playing, they're not quite ready to show interest and to focus on the book. But if you can sit and hold them on your lap for a while and you can read a story to them without them moving and they're interested in the story, then that's a good indicator that they're getting close to moving on to the next step. The other thing that we want to look at is reading and repeating. If you read something, and you can practice this, if your child is sitting there and they're paying attention and they want to be involved in the story, you can say, you can point to the words. I'm going to show you this way. You can point to the words and you can read them. And then you can point to the words again and have them read them and say, oh, what did that say? And they can repeat it after you as you show them the words. You point to the words as they read them again. This is a read and report or read and repeat method. The read and repeat method is really going to help your children remember words. Okay, some people say this is a whole word approach and it's not good and all they're doing is memorizing words. There is so much more to it than that. Really, what they're doing is not just memorizing words, but they are putting those words in order. This is important. They're taking the sentence and the thought and they're putting those words in an order and they're recalling those words. The recall is what we want to focus on. If they can recall 2 or 3 words, that's pretty good if they can repeat 2 or 3 words back to you. But what we really want to get to is that they can read the sentence or read something and repeat back to you up to almost 7 words. So 6 to 7 words is what they should be able to repeat back to you and have them all in order. You'll notice that if your child is just not quite there yet, they'll repeat 2 or 3 words and then they'll start mixing up words and mixing up the sentence. So when they get to 7-word phrases that they can repeat back to you, that means that their memory is ready to take on a higher task of recalling sounds and letters and words. But if they don't have that first recall, they're not quite ready to move ahead. So good to know, right? Because so many times I hear it's just repeating and they're just memorizing it. Good. Good. We want them to memorize those things so we can see where their memory is at and what they can recall. That's the valuable part in that. Okay, so read and remembering is a little bit different. So we can read and they can recall a sentence or a phrase. But when they start reading the whole book from memory and they have the book pretty much memorized and they recall that book, then they are ready for the next stage. Is that so cool? So if they have this book, for example, and they can open it and they can read it and recall the whole book, I'm going to use a section A book. If I can find an A, I have all these books and I'm not seeing an A level. Let's try, I thought I grabbed an A. I don't want to see. Sorry, I apologize. Give me a second. Oh, they're all C's. They're all C's and above. So I guess I'll just do, okay. Well, I thought I grabbed a younger book, but I didn't. So we'll just go with the C. But when we're looking at a leveled book like this, so a lot of it is repeated patterns. You'll see a lot of repeated patterns in A, B, C's, and D books, and then it'll start getting into different types. But tiger cubs are like you. So this would be repeated the whole time. Tiger cubs are like you throughout the whole book, and maybe one word would change in an A book. And the sentences would be really short. There's a reason why. So remember, when you find these leveled books, your A books are going to have 3 to 4 words max that they can recall back. Okay. And then as you get into C's and D's and E's, the sentences get longer because we want to see that recall. We want to see if they're ready to move on into reading. So the leveled readers really are invaluable. Now, I know just because I'm on the leveled readers and I don't want to forget to tell you, the leveled readers, these are scholastic readers. I like the science readers. The other readers are just silly and the stories don't really have a purpose or a meaning. So I don't even go there. I don't really like the one I was showing you earlier. I made the mistake of purchasing the little readers with the stories and there's no substance to them. So go for the science readers because at least your children are learning some interesting facts with the science readers and there's something happening. They're like actually learning and engaging in the readers. So just my little beef there. These are scholastic ones and you can purchase them from their website. I would purchase a set of little readers because the more you do them, there's repetition in it that we'll get to, but they're just really valuable to have. Okay, so the little readers are going to start with small words. They're going to expand into larger sentences. That's why they have the letters on them. It shows where they're at with their reading and with their recall. Okay, so with the readers, what we're going to be looking at is reading and remembering the whole text. So when they can sit down and they can read this whole thing and they can point to all the words and recall all the words on their own, even if they don't have an understanding of sounds yet, it's okay. You don't want to bring sounds into it yet. And I'll tell you why in a second. Okay. After they get all of this read, then you can move up to the next level reader, which is going to be a D reader. And then you just work through A, B, C, D. I think they can go up to F, and then you'll start learning, or they'll start connecting all the letters and sounds as you get through these readers. I'll show you how that works. I know I'm kind of skipping ahead of myself there a little bit, but for pre-reader, this is what I'm hoping you to understand is just they need to be speaking the language. They need to be speaking English. If they're not speaking, they're not ready to start reading. Okay. Book play. They need to be able to hold the book correctly and know that words go right to left or left to right and top to bottom. Okay. The third thing is that they read and listen on your lap for an extended amount of time and that they can read and repeat the stories that you share with them. And then they can also read and recall a whole story, a short story like these little readers. Then if your child is ready or if your child is doing those things, then they're ready for the next step of reading. The next step to reading is reading practice. Now, this is where all of the sound recognition comes in. I will repeat this because I have so many people that say, oh, my child doesn't know all their alphabet letters. They don't need to know all the names of the letters yet. They need to know the sounds. Focus on the sounds and then the letter names. Okay, the sounds come first. They need to understand sound recognition. Now, this is how this works. With pre-reading, we are working with sentences. We're working with sentences. When we go to reading practice, we want to work with syllables first, syllabication, so we know that they can hear all the sounds in the words. So we're working on syllabication. And then if they understand and can separate all the syllabic, that word, all of those sounds out, then they can go back and you can go a little bit in more depth and you can start learning all the different individual sounds within the syllable sections of a word. Okay, this is how we work it. We don't go to somebody or our child and we don't teach them the cellular structure of the body in order to get them to understand that they have eyes and ears and hands and feet. We start with what we can see, with what we are experiencing, and then we can go deeper with our children. So many times we get so confused, I think, and the public school system does this, where they start with the tiniest little part of a word, and then they try to expand on it, and there's no connection. Children can't make a connection with a cell to an ear. It's a weird concept. It's backwards. And so it's really important that we understand the system of expanding what we know, what we can see, what we can experience, where we say, hey, little child who's 5, you have eyes. Where are your eyes? You have ears. Where are your ears? The same thing happens with our language. We want to do the same thing with our language. So when we do sentences, we want to say, hey, little 5-year-old, where is the word the in the sentence? Hey, little 5-year-old, where is the word cat in the sentence? Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm getting at? We start by teaching them the things that they can see and the things that they already know that are out in the open. And then we can start going deeper into, hey, this word is cat. You know where the cat is in the sentence. Now let's break that cat down into syllable parts and let's hear all the sounds in the syllable. And then we're going to take each of those syllable parts. So cat wouldn't really work with this. So I'm going to say catastrophe, not that you would use that word with a small child, but that has syllables, right? Catastrophe. And then you would break it up into those syllables, and then you would teach those syllable parts, and then you go into the tiniest cell of the word and the tiniest part of the word, which is the sound. Do you see how this works? This is really important when we have kids that really struggle with reading. This is why they struggle with reading, because we're showing them the tiny cell that makes up the skin of the ear, and then we call it an ear. But it needs to work the opposite way. We learn differently than that. Okay, I'm off on my tangent, I think. So I'm going to keep going forward. So sound recognition, we start looking at sound recognition through syllables and then individual letter sounds. I say sound symbols instead because the alphabet is made up of 26 letters. Let's see if I got that right. I say 24 because 2 of the letters I don't think should even be letters, but that's my opinion. So we have all the letters of the alphabet. However, there are more than, or can be, 46 different sounds in the English language that don't have a representation. Okay, we clump letters together and we create representation. That is the most confusing part of our language, is that there is not a representation for each sound. So what I have done in my reading program, if you have a struggling reader, or if you want to do it this way, please look into my little reading books that I have to help children learn how to read. It's called Step In Reading. And in the book, it takes you through that every sound has a representation, a symbol representation. Those symbol representations need to take place in the words. Our kids can't take these weird sounds where there's letter combinations and try to make all these different letters make that sound. It's completely bogus. It's really hard for them to comprehend that. But if we have a symbol that represents every sound, then that helps them place the sound where it needs to be in the word. Instead of saying, oh, well, A needs a partner E or I to make a sound instead of a or it, whatever it is, all these different sounds can get really, really confusing for kids. So when you're working on sound symbols, it may be beneficial for you to make sure that every sound has a symbol representation. Okay, this is a plus for kids who are really struggling with reading, especially those who are dyslexic. And then they can place every sound in the word. When they can place every sound in the word, it becomes easier to help them understand how the combinations work later on. Okay, so we do repeated reading where they practice the words several times, but in this section, the reading practice, they will sound out the words instead of just reading and repeating and memorizing the words. They're going to sound them out and they're going to repeat those sounds over and over again. And then they'll also do repeated listening in this section right here. As far as reading practice goes. When your child gets to reading practice and they can do the sound recognitions, they know the sound symbol recognitions for every sound, and they can do symbol or letter combinations, and they can start putting words together, and they're repeating their reading so they can read it over and over again so they get used to how those words look and how those sounds combine together. Then they can also do repeated listening where they listen to the stories over and over again as well. When they can get to that point, and this is the biggest part, right? The reading practice is the biggest part of learning how to read. Then they move into fluency and comprehension. This is the 3rd level of reading. After they can do those things, then we look at fluency, how quickly they can read and how quickly they can make those words come out in a fluid fashion, in a fluid motion, as if they were talking to people. And then we also, during this section, work on building vocabulary and their spelling patterns. and then just the word parts and the meanings of word parts. So this is where we get our Greek and Latin coming in, and how we can comprehend what the meaning of words are through the parts and pieces that they may have within them. And then after the fluency and the comprehension, we have independent reading. This means that they can fluently read, that they already understand a lot of the definitions and meanings of words and how they're put together in syntax. And then also during this independent time, it's a time for them to continue building bigger words and bigger vocabulary and higher comprehension skills, where they can get to the point where they can start evaluating what they're reading. These are the 4 steps to reading. So one more time: pre-reading, the reading practice, and then we have fluency and comprehension and independent reading. If you would like, I have a downloadable version of this on my website at stepinbdlc.com that you're welcome to download. So you can just have it for a reference if you're really worried about where your kids are at with their reading. I know I've taken a lot of your time, but I do want to share with you one other thing that I found that was really cool. We do have the leveled readers that I shared with you earlier. And so I will put those aside. In the form, if you choose to download the file that I shared with you with all the 4 different areas of reading, there is instruction that will kind of help you walk through what to do during those different stages as well. So it's a little bit more detailed than that. I did want to share this with you because this just came up and this is really cool. So this is from the Apologetics Press. I'm going to just show you here, Apologetics Press. You can look this up, and they have little readers that are based on God's design. So this one is a level 3, but they have level 1, 2, and 3. And there's about 20 books, I believe, in each of those areas. So I wanted to share that with you because sometimes it's really hard to find good little readers that make sense or that can spark conversation with you and your children. So these little readers are great. I will post them that I found them, and it's an option. And I'm losing my voice because I'm talking too much. So I just wanted to share those with you. If you have any other questions about reading, or if you have a child who is struggling to read, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help you try to figure out a system for them and try. There's a lot of different things that you can do for them. In other words, is what I'm trying to say. I also have a document that is called Struggling Readers for the Struggling Reader. And it's like the first one where it shows the 4 different areas of reading or the different levels of reading. But this one is specifically for children who are struggling to read and trying to get them prepped to help get them ready to read. There are different activities in that file that you can download, that you can look at, and you can practice at home with your child to help them get ready to read. This is very near and dear to my heart, as I've had a child who has major dyslexia and really struggled reading for a really long time. So the research that I have within even the Step In reading books is powerful. They're all the golden nuggets from thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of different programs that we tried to help figure out how to help my son. So that is something that I want to share with you as well. And happy reading. Enjoy your reading time with your children. Get books out, read to your children often, because it really does create a love for learning and a love for reading in your environment. And that's what you want. Even if your children aren't readers, you want that part of your environment to be there so that they see the joy and the excitement and how fun it can be to read. That's what I have for you today. And carpe diem, keep it real, seize the day. See ya.